Okay, so this slide I added today while I was listening to Noser. So I have known Noser for 3 decades, but let me assure you, I have not heard him speak on this topic earlier, what he said today. I agree with large portions of his talk, and in fact my slides which were written earlier during my car ride to here reiterate several of these ideas. In my own way, I have written about what Noser called personal view of probability, and that was way back in 1996 in this little journal which Indian Academy of Science puts out called Resonance. However, in my view, 0 and 1 are allowed values. So, yeah, that's okay. Because I don't give a gambling interpretation and no moral hazard of, even if I know it is never going to happen to offer a bet and all that. So for a consistent view, in my view, the 0 and 1 are to be allowed values, but we can debate that. In any case, I am not a Bayesian statistician, as I said, but then I am not strictly speaking a statistician either. So I am a probabilist, and so I get to speak here, which is a Bayesian meeting, and then tomorrow I get to speak at the non-Bayesian meeting, as Noser called it. So. On a more serious note, I like to take best of both worlds, Bayesian and non-Bayesian. Some ideas here appeal and are natural, some ideas there are natural, and I use them where they seem fit. That's my general approach towards use of statistics in any practical problem. Now, when one is talking about models of physical phenomena, perhaps objective view of probability is the right one. If two physicists discuss ad nauseum and eventually they have to agree on something, and that is the 2 or more. So that's perhaps the objective view. However, when one is talking about probabilities of choices made by a group of people, perhaps subjective probability is the right option. You can't force 2 people having the same set of information to process it in identical way and come out with the same answer. Okay? So therefore there is a difference. When you are talking of physical phenomena, perhaps objective one. When you are talking about application of probability to games, to climate, to traffic patterns, what you may have. Okay. Perhaps one may allow subjective probability. Each one may have their own view. There is nothing contradictory between these two. It doesn't have to be objective versus subjective. That's what I meant. Okay, so these were slides I.
That view of subjective as a scientist.
Yeah.
One would be inclined to completely say that 2 people with exactly the same kind of information would it still arrive at it?
So as a scientist, as I said, if you are applying it for science to validate a theory or repudiate a theory, you need an objective view. But if I want to use statistics to do something, okay,
consistency.
But what is required is more required perhaps is to come out with an answer in next 20 minutes. You see, when faced with such a choice, it may not even be consistent. But if it is a reasonable answer which does the job, perhaps why not? So, you see, let me give an example from a game. Let's say cricket. Okay, a bowler is coming in to bowl. A batsman, seeing the bowler's actions, okay, is going to decode, is he going to bowl a Yorker or not? Okay. Now, someone who is very experienced, Sachin Tendulkar, at a certain point of time decides that this guy is now going to bowl a Yorker and he prepares accordingly. A fresher, a rookie, may not. Now, are we going to force that a fresher and Sachin have to have the same
Different states of knowledge.
Yeah, so that's a different state of knowledge.
Yeah, but I think the question is given same states of knowledge. Yeah. Do you assign the same?
Okay, let's take same state of knowledge. Let's take Sachin and let's take another batsman who is equally experienced. Now, we may get out of that by saying that the 2 of them have a different state of knowledge. So that way, if you are saying 2 people making the same observations, do they have to come to the same answer or not? We may say that 2 of them have different set of knowledge. Then we can get away with that.
I think the question of whether human beings infer reason in an optimal irrational manner is a separate question.
Okay.
The question of how to arrive at the optimal answer is a separate question.
But you are assuming, wait. You are assuming that there is an optimal answer. What I am saying is there can be scenarios where there is no optimal answer.
Okay, so let's proceed with that. Okay.
So
That is the optimal solution.
Okay, so my personal view of probability, which seems closer in spirit to the Bayesian philosophy, indeed, I view probability as a measure of uncertainty inherent in the outcome of an experiment. This uncertainty can be arising out of incomplete understanding of the underlying phenomena. It could be lack of observations needed to reach the conclusion, or it could even be inability to read someone's mind, like I said, batsman at a bowl. Okay, so the uncertainty could be hundreds of reasons, and based on all the things that you have, you may assign a number to that. Okay, it could also be due to phenomena being chaotic. So you may be making the best of your measurements, but your instruments are such that in the allowable error, it can just turn topsy-turvy, and all your understanding and measurements may not lead you to have a better guess at what the outcome is going to be. Okay? So it could be any of these reasons. So uncertainty arising out of possible incomplete understanding of the underlying phenomena. Correct me if I am wrong. I am taking an example. Radioactivity. So we have no model which would tell as to which atoms of the radioactive substance would emit gamma rays. All we have is that if you start with an ensemble of atoms, so many of them is going to, that's an observed fact, etc. But if you have to get down to a micro level model, probabilistic model seems the ideal one, because we don't understand that. We don't rule out that sometime in the future somebody comes out with a theory which exactly tells which are the molecules which are going to disintegrate in the next nanosecond. Who knows? So this could be one. Other one, uncertainty due to lack of observations needed to reach a conclusion about an outcome. So after the election is over, namely voting has ended, the winner is completely decided. There is no more uncertainty left there. Okay? The fate is sealed in ballot boxes or in voting machines or whatever it be. Okay? But since no one knows the votes have been exactly what is going to happen till the votes have been counted, we can keep talking about probability of winning and so on and so forth. Okay? Now here is the coin. I have just placed it here. Same thing. Whether which face is up, I know it, you don't know it, because you can't see it. And as long as you can't read my mind that okay, for you the event is uncertain. In a sense, it is same as if I were going to talk. I am talking about a coin that I am going to toss now.
So states of knowledge again.
States of knowledge. It's to do with states of knowledge, and that's what he called about personal view and time. Okay. So the states of so what you are saying exactly, and what I am saying is exactly what Moser put in these interesting pictures of a man and a time.
No, but that's
yeah.
Personal view is saying that I know you place a coin there, Moser knows you place a coin there. Our personalities are different and we can reach different conclusions.
Yes.
Whereas what some of us were saying is that an ideal reasoner, knowing exactly what we know, should reach the same conclusion.
Not necessarily. And I don't want to take away Rajiv, but Rajiv, I disagree with you on two things. One is you are a very good statistician.
Okay.
The second thing I disagree with you is you are also a Bayesian.
No. Yeah, thank you. Now, so another example, this time from soccer, that inability to read another player's mind. Again, game of soccer, a player is getting ready to take a penalty shot. The player would have made up his mind as to where he is aiming, but the goalkeeper's perspective, he is still uncertain. So, again, the personal view as it is coming. Almost every game has this element of uncertainty, and that's what makes the games interesting. Several of us watching a game, we can keep arguing, no, he's going to win, no, he's going to win. We all are observing the same thing, right? So, people place bets on different players, again. So, anyway, so in this view of probability theory, the probability of event is not a universal constant such as the speed of light, but it depends on observer's knowledge and the information about the underlying phenomena at that point of time. So this sentence I had written before I saw Moser's presentation this morning. Anyway, so in other words, the probability could be different for different observers, it could be different at different times when their set of information is different. I don't use the word knowledge, I simply use the word information. So yeah.
Probably the set of information and the information processor. Because no two people are exactly identical. So that's why even if given the same information, they can assign different problems.
I do want to make, both of you are right. There was a British mathematician called Ramsey. You must know of him because of your control theory background, called the Ramsey problem.
Yeah.
He made a phenomenal observation, and the observation was this: that two people same set of knowledge can still have different properties.
Yeah.
And the reason is that once a certain event is revealed, your system of beliefs could be so changed because of what you thought could happen has in fact actually happened. And that's called the principle of conditionalization. And that essentially supports
In fact,
what Raj
I'm going to, in a few slides down the road, I'm going to ask a question which is going to divide this very audience. So let's see.
No, and actually that point I was trying to make is I think the question does make sense because no two people are identical.
Yeah, so that's what I said, that we can get out of that by saying that their information or their knowledge set is different. So,
So it's an untestable question.
Yeah. Okay.
I think that there are some people that just feel very uncomfortable by basing a mathematical theory on something that seems to be now defined as intrinsically tied up with unknowable psychology, character traits of people.
The mathematics start.
I'd much rather say probability is the function of objectively specified set of information, and that information, objectively specified, objectively specifies a probability. And so different sets of knowledge, different sets of information give you different probabilities. But there's not some magical personality thing mixed in.
Okay.
Instead of
No, wait.
So, okay, can
Yeah.
I also say something?
Yeah.
Instead of personalities, let's talk about algorithms. Two algorithms give two answers, but only one is optimal. I think
No, am I saying, anyway, no, that's not what I'm saying, okay? But the mathematics begins once we have agreed on a probability model. Given the probability model, what conclusions we can draw, what are the principles, on that we all have to agree, that is a mathematical theory. How does a model relate to a real phenomena? We all can have different views on that, I don't see anything wrong with that. How does this model relate to this phenomena?
Yeah, I think that's not the issue. The issue is given the same amount of information, you must have the same probability assignment. That is the issue here.
No, but then the same information is difficult to quantify. you see.
Two humans. who
Difficult
apply the understood
to
algorithm.
difficult to quantify same information in that level of meta talk. You see.
That might be, but it doesn't mean that you can now define the probability still by saying, well, and then there is some extra stuff that has to do with this person being special, but then the probability still belongs to this person. Then it just means in certain situations.
No, we agree to disagree. Okay, we agree to disagree completely.
So before this meeting, I knew that frequentists and Bayesians disagree. Now I know Bayesians and Bayesians disagree. Let's continue at this point.
That's why I don't like to put any label on what I. But he has certified me to be a Bayesian. So.
certainly.
Okay. Now, in Bayesian view, an observer translates her or his understanding of the phenomena into assigning probabilities to possible values of the parameter by a probability distribution which we call prior, which we saw. Then the observer.
Oh, you go back to your old slide.
Yeah. So, okay, yeah. In various situations, based on general principles, one is able to construct a model for underlying phenomena with some uncertainty about some parameters involved. So, we construct a model, we can agree on it, but the only point of disagreement or only unspecified thing could be a parameter, like modeling traffic patterns. There is some general principles involved for ages. People have observed lots of data, and if you are looking at, let's say, Sholinganallur Junction in Chennai, and you are looking at traffic on OMR coming from the south in a time interval around 5 p.m. on different days, when you see, you can see that it's supposed to be a Poisson distribution. The only thing is, what is the parameter of the Poisson distribution? So likewise, when you are tossing a coin, if you see me tossing a coin 10 times, you will all agree that it's a binomial distribution. Only thing uncertain left is what is the parameter p. Okay. So that's what I mean, that based on general principles we agree on a certain form of the probability with one variable which is left to be specified, and that is what is called a parameter. And lots of statistics is about inference about this parameter, answering whether it is 0 or 1 or something else, is it above this, below this. So in a very wide perspective, lots of statistical problems are brought down to this framework, where you have specified a probability model, you all agree on that, what is left unspecified is a parameter. Now, before one can use this model, say for optimal traffic management, one needs to estimate this parameter, only then we can start, because till then it is still incomplete. And in the Bayesian view, an observer translates her or his understanding of the phenomena into assigning probabilities to different values of this parameter via a probability distribution which is called prior. Once we assign this prior, then
the observations on the traffic pattern can be used in turn to derive posterior distribution via Bayes theorem. That means you have a prior belief, you have these observations, you put this all together, process it through algorithm, process it through whatever meta machine, and that machine is a Bayes theorem, which gives you a unique way of combining your prior and your observations to get you a new set of probability assignments. Okay? And that is what is Bayes theorem. And so Bayes theorem can be viewed as a way to incorporate information to update one's view about the parameter. This aspect is what Bayes framework very amenable to applications and has found takers in different disciplines. Because nobody goes blind in a real application area. Whoever is experimenter has various ideas about what this data is likely to be, how it is going to be. You want to refine it further using these observations, and that's what. You come up to a point now, you have some added more data, now you want to refine it further. Now this Bayesian approach makes it very amenable, and that's what, in my view, apart from its philosophical appeal, it is this aspect which is appealing to lots of application areas. So I'll give one concrete application given of this approach, but first I want to discuss a point that highlights some of the pitfalls in use of conditional probability, which occurs a lot in any kind of Bayesian framework, in assigning probabilities, doing this and that. So this is nothing I have cooked up, this is very well there in the literature, so Noether is laughing because he has seen this, but for many people in the audience it may be different, and I suppose I am going to get different answers from the audience. So let's say, so there are 3 prisoners in separate cells in some crazy country, sentenced to death, and the governor has selected one of them at random to be pardoned. Okay? Now, the prisoners don't know it. The warden knows which one is to be pardoned because the governor doesn't want to wake up next morning. They have to be hanged next morning, so governor simply decides who is to be pardoned, tells the warden and goes off to sleep. He of course tells the warden not to tell the prisoners. Okay? He is not to reveal this information to the prisoner because even the one who is going to be let off has to sweat it out that night. Alright. So, so the warden is not allowed to tell the prisoners. Alright. The prisoner A, let's call it A, begs the warden first to tell him whether he is going to survive or not, and warden refuses. Then he says, he thinks he is smart. He asks him, okay, whether I am going to be hanged or not, one of the other two is definitely going to be hanged. The warden thinks and says, is he passing on any information? He agrees, no, he is not passing on any information. He says yes. Then he says, okay, then tell me name of one of the other two who is going to be executed. One of them is definitely being executed. Tell me name of the other, one of the other two. Anyway, I can't go and tell them. You are telling me doesn't make any difference. So after some thought, the warden answers B. Okay. So who was smarter, the warden or the prisoner A? Namely, did prisoner A get out any information from the warden, or was the warden right in answering him without revealing him information about chances of A's survival? In particular, has A learnt any information relevant to him? In other words, initially his chance of survival was 1/3. Now he has learned this. What are his chances of survival? Is it still 1/3 or is it something else? 1/2. So, okay, is there someone who disagrees with 1/2?
Take a poll.
Yeah, that's what. So is there somebody who disagrees with 1/2?
Disagree with 1/2 for 1.
Huh?
1/2 for 1.
So, chances of survival of A. Okay, one answer is 1/2, that it has changed to 1/2. The other answer is no change, which is 1/3.
Yeah, you have to ask one by one.
Huh?
Disagrees with this answer is confusing.
Okay, alright. Who agrees with 1/3, that it has remained at 1/3, not changed? Okay.
It depends on whether you're a Bayesian or not.
And so I presume the others. So who agrees with this, that the chances have changed to half? Alright. So my premise is that I am going to put a question which is going to divide this very house as come true. Okay.
You missed out the third alternative, that is something else.
No one would.
Is there somebody who thinks it is something else? So
It's
okay.
neither,
No, no,
you
no.
don't have enough information.
You don't have enough information. Okay. So, okay, that is actually the right answer. That.
Then it hasn't changed.
Huh?
Then it hasn't changed. No extra information, so it doesn't change.
Incomplete. We don't have. If you have to, or in other words, if you have to really answer what is the conditional probability given all this, it is the information given is incomplete. So I'll explain that in a minute. So, okay, so some people, this is one argument. So some people argue that since A now knows that B is going to be hanged, the other person to be hanged is A or C with equal probability, and therefore the probability from A's point of view that he will survive has gone up to half from 1.
Why equal probability?
Because he has not learned anything otherwise, and he just says, okay, B is going to be hanged, that's the information. If you think, okay, I'll come back to this in a minute. Right. Okay. Now the counter argument is as follows, which leads to 1/3. The counter argument is, suppose the conditional probability that A will survive given answer is B is half. Now by symmetry, B and C are just abstract labels we have put. So if the answer was C, by a similar logic, the answer should have been half. Okay. So if you ask a question, the only answers can be B or C. Either answer he gives, your chances change to half. So you can just ask a question and not even wait to hear the answer. Your chances have changed. Now something is wrong. Right? So what this means is that if there are only two possibilities, and in both the conditional probability changes to half, that means the unconditional is equal to half. One of the equations put up in the earlier two talks will give us this. And that's a contradiction, because to begin with it was a third. Okay. So indeed, the symmetry argument will give 1/3. If you say that, suppose the first one, conditional probability is alpha, the other is also alpha, and therefore last one is alpha. Since alpha is 1/3, each of the conditional one is 1/3. Now, it so happens that a large proportion of statisticians who insist that no, the conditional probability has indeed changed to half are Bayesians, and likewise, large proportion of Bayesians that I have talked to also think that chance of survival has gone up. How about you, Nozer? What is your view?
Well, I think I know the answer.
I think they're not very good basics.
Because it's like a two-sided bet. I know what it is.
Okay, all right. Now, in fact, these people with whom I have argued, they do not buy the symmetry argument. They say that we know the answer is B. So why should I break my head over what if the answer was C? Okay, so though some of the Bayesians are extremely dogmatic, as Nozer could testify, and they very strongly say, no, I don't want to hear what is C, because C has not happened. I don't care if C has happened. So, putting it down, what it comes down to is the following. Is there a difference between the information contained in the two exchanges, 1 and 2? One is, prisoner A begs the warden to let him know the identity of one of the other two who is going to be executed, answer B. And exchange 2, prisoner A begs the warden to let him know if B will be hanged, answer yes. Okay? Are these two exactly the same scenarios or different scenarios? In scenario 2, it is very clear that the chance will go to half, because out of the 3 possible events for hanging A, B, BC and AC, you are ruling out AC. So it is between AB and AC, and therefore AB and BC, and therefore the chances change to half. So if the exchange was number 2, then eventually we all should agree that the chance indeed does change to half. Why under 1 there seems to be this disagreement is, as our friend told, the question is not ill-posed or not completely posed, because really speaking, to answer that question we need to model the behavior of the jailer or of the warden. Okay? So when I am saying the symmetry argument, it is kind of implicitly assuming that when both B and C are going to be hanged, the warden is something like tossing a coin to give you an answer B or C.
But for 2 also you need to model the warden, right?
No, for 2 you don't have to model the warden. Only
the warden is giving some answers. So
no, we are assuming that the warden is telling the truth. He is not leading you to a... Yeah. Okay. So in both 1 and 2 we assume that the warden is telling you the truth. But in 1, because the answer for the warden is not unique, okay, we have to make an assumption how his mind is going to work. So symmetry assumption kind of makes that a model that in the given exchange that I asked, the warden is tossing a coin in the background.
So you're saying that most people, if A is going to be hanged, A is going to be pardoned, warden can say B or C, you're saying most people would say B. They would not say C, something like that.
No. People kind of implicitly assume when people say half, immediately they are actually thinking of the scenario 2 and not scenario 1.
Yeah.
They are thinking of that now they have learned B is going to be hanged. Okay, let's see. That information has come. Now let us process this information.
So I'm interested in why 1/3 is wrong for scenario 1. I'm interested in why 1/3 is wrong.
No, according to me, 1/3 is the right one.
Is the right answer.
Okay.
according to me.
But you were saying you are assuming that the warden will choose B or C with equal probability
Yeah.
if either of them is.
Yeah, if both of them are going to be hanged, and under that model you will get 1/3 as the answer.
Right.
And
The subtle difference between the two.
yeah, that is the difference, and that is extremely important.
Condition.
Conditioning. So, so the apparent, just I'll finish this. Apparent paradox arises.
The symmetry is what.
So instead of ABC, I could have chosen some names.
No, that's what I'm saying. The symmetry is the one that imposes the condition.
Yeah. So, but the problem is imposed to really resolve the issue. We have to model the behavior of the warden. How does the warden choose answer when B and C are going to be hanged? What this example points out is that while incorporating observations in updating probabilities, going from prior to posterior, in addition to taking into account the information contained in the answer, one should also take into account the question that was asked. It is this aspect that several Bayesians contest.
So can I ask, who are the Bayesians who contested?
Then
Then the question will boil down to, are they really Bayesians?
all I can say is that there are people who write papers on Bayesian statistics.
I know,
But, yeah,
I know,
several of them.
several, I know.
In fact, I'll tell a story about this. I was still a PhD student at ISI, and we were roped in to do corrections of the entrance exam. One year, inadvertently, this question got passed into an exam for MStat entrance. And as the case were, all the people were supposed to evaluate. We will sit together, go over the answers for partial grading scheme, and eventually, each question only 1 or 2 persons will do, so that there is a consistency. So when we were discussing, when it came to this question, all hell broke loose. There were likewise disagreements, strong disagreements. And then what was suggested naturally was that in any case, we can keep debating, but for this exam purpose, anyone who has given any of the 2 answers and given a coherent reason should be given full marks. And it was Bayesians amongst that who strongly protested, we cannot give full marks to a wrong answer. Of course, it was given to correct to people who agreed to give full marks to both the answers, and we resolved the issue for them. So, but it is this point that you have to take into account coherent allocation of conditional probabilities, even not just to give an answer, but what if the answers were the other ones. That's the issue. But this is a philosophical issue which. But so you are saying you are agreeing with me that it is 1/3.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And by the way, I mean,
But this is usually given in television shows.
but it is exactly equivalent to the so-called Monty Hall problem, which has been discussed a lot
Exactly.
about the game show host and changing the gate doors, etc.
I take my view, which is 1/3.
Huh?
I take my view, which is 1/3.
Now you agree to it. Okay, thank you. So,
So there's a version of the Monty Hall problem with 1,000 doors.
huh?
There's a version of the Monty Hall problem with 1,000 doors, where you choose one of the thousands, and then the quiz show master opens 998 doors to show you that none of those contain the prize. So there are 2 doors left, yours, the one you're holding, and 1 door at the other end of the hall that the quiz show master decided not to open.
To completely answer this, one still needs to model the quiz show host master. Does he know where the car was, or he arbitrarily opened 998 doors? Is he trying to help you, or is he trying to confuse you?
Yes.
All this you have to model. Then we can answer the question.
That's your answer.
That's my answer.
In that particular real scenario, you would not change doors. Because it sounds quite irrational.
Well, if it were a game show, I would actually change, because my view is that they are not trying to save money. They want more and more people to win the car, because the cost of the car is negligible to their overall ad spend. So they are not trying to cheat you out of the car. He's trying to help you, and I would actually switch.
But it would be
But
very hard for him to right?
but that is my view. But no, what this is bringing, there are lots of. If you just hit Google with probability paradox, you will get tons of hits.
Yeah.
Okay, and most of them are not everything, but most of them are to do with this conditional probability. And if you dig deeper, it is to do with the full conditions not being completely specified. And depending on what your state of the mind at that time is, you read it in one way, you will get one answer. You read another way, you might get another answer. And at the back of it is this ill-posedness, namely, you have to make some assumption about somebody doing some choice.
Exchange too. Why is it a valid exchange?
Why not? Not in the given question, but the given question, the exchange 2 was not relevant, but why not? We can ask and the warden may or may not answer. What do you mean valid? So
He may not answer it.
he may not answer. All I said was that a lot of people inadvertently think of exchange 2 rather than the exchange 1 while giving the answer and as switching to the conclusion half. So it's a very subtle point, but that not just the answer but the question which was asked is also important, at least according to me and to many. By the way, I should also correct Professor D. Basu, who was a big time Bayesian,
Yes.
and he has written about this and he has argued strongly it has not changed.
Is that so?
Yeah. So,
I think most of the Bayesian system will say it has not changed.
Okay.
The important thing is if you're a prisoner in that situation, ask questions. Okay, question number 2. Don't ask questions.
yeah, but then the question is the warden may not answer.
Yeah.
You see, so A was thinking he is trying to be smart by camouflaging the question, trying to learn something. Okay? So, anyway, so there are many, many paradoxes which, so let me just quickly come to what I promised, one concrete application of these Bayesian ideas in something which is directly nothing to do with Bayesian, but it's an area which is related with engineering rather than physics. It's called filtering theory, and it is to do with, you have a signal xt which is being transmitted. You may think of it as a signal or a telephone, voice signal is sent, telephone, radio, or a television signal has been sent through satellite, and the equipment modulates it, and what actually gets sent and received is h of xt, but it's in the presence of noise. And so the what is observed is what I have written as little yt, and nt is the noise. So that is what is called white noise. At different time points it is supposed to be independent and identically distributed, etc. Now, the white noise in continuous time doesn't quite exist, and so what one does is, to make it rigorous, one looks at accumulated observations, capital YT, then accumulated noise, which then turns out to be Brownian motion. The heuristic assumptions on the noise on little nt, when you translate it to assumptions on WT, the indefinite integral, that becomes a Brownian motion, and therefore the model which is studied is YT equal to HXS plus WT. Okay. Now, the problem of filtering is that having observed Y, to recover the signal as best as possible. So your television set has received the signal with some corrupted noise, but you want to view whatever is transmitted from the studio in real time. Okay. So when I read this first, I was quite perplexed, because this is, I like trying to do statistics with one observation. Okay. So, but this becomes feasible once we know the characteristics of the signal, namely we have some idea about distribution of the signal. Okay. So another way to put the filtering problem is, for that we get the conditional distribution pi of xt conditioned on the observations up to time t. Pi t is called the filter. There is the obvious analogy with the Bayesian framework. The known distribution of the signal is like the prior, and filter is the posterior. So, yeah.
So here, just to get the problem, understand the problem correctly. X of s is a random variable,
Yeah,
and the function h of x of s is known.
yeah, h is known. The function h is known. So, the interest is in tracking the signal in real time. Typically one assumes that xt is a Markov process, and when we say distribution is known, that means its generator or the semigroup underlying is known. And moreover, having obtained the conditional distribution pi t of xt at time t, it is desirable to obtain in a small time interval epsilon, pi t plus epsilon as an update of pi t rather than a fresh computation. This is a very important point, and again, because of the analogy with Bayesian, etc., this comes out very quickly. And so, having okay, let me skip this. When the signal xt is a Gaussian Markov process driven by a linear stochastic differential equation, so and the observation is again given by, so the h function is linear plus the underlying process is a Gaussian process having this nice structure. Okay, this is the problem which is called linear filtering, and this was considered by Kalman over 50 years ago, and complete a solution given, and has been used extensively in various applications. And so In this case, the interesting thing is that since the pair x and y is a Gaussian process, it follows that pi t itself is also a Gaussian distribution. That's a general thing about Gaussian, that you have a whole family of Gaussian variables. You take conditional distribution of one given some subset thereof, the resulting conditional distribution is also Gaussian. And therefore, to determine the same, one needs to only obtain the mean, which is a random, is actually a functional of the observations, the mean, conditional mean. The variance, which in general can be a random variable itself, turns out to be a deterministic function. This is a fact about Gaussian. And one can therefore pre-compute sigma square even before you observe. Once you have fixed your model, the sigma t square can be pre-computed. It is actually a solution of a differential equation called Riccati equation. So then in real time, all you need to do is to track the signal, is you observe your y and then you feed it into the equation which drives the conditional mean. And the conditional mean is usually written as xt hat, and that's a solution to a linear stochastic differential equation. And it has been used extensively in large number of applications, including space. There have been claims made that if not for Kalman filtering, the space thing would not have, the Apollo mission would not have gone, but and so on and so forth, because they had to really, even a small deviation in the angle of launch could translate a lot. So therefore, they have to keep real time looking at the trajectory and apply the corrections and so on and so forth. How far these claims are true, I don't know, but anyway, it said that, but the fact remains that it's an extremely used, a tool which has been used extensively in various engineering applications. So, okay, so the, when this, just few minutes, so when x is perhaps not Gaussian but given by a nonlinear SDE, and namely that instead of ATXT it's some sigma xt, etc., as well as in the general observation model where that transfer function or the modulation function is not linear, then it's called the problem of nonlinear filtering, and it gave rise to a whole lot of new research, gave lots of new problems in probability theory and interface thereof. And this theme was actually one of the early themes in which the theory of stochastic differential equations had a concrete application. So why I chose to talk about this was that, strictly speaking, it is not found as in a Bayesian literature, but there is a very close simile with the Bayesian word. And one of the early formulae for the nonlinear case, which was derived by Kalyanpur and Strebel, is actually known as the Kalyanpur-Strebel Bayes formula, because it's an analog of the Bayes theorem in infinite dimensional framework. So this is just to show that that the Bayesian paradigm, if not the exact things which are said and written by Bayesian statisticians, but the Bayesian paradigm per se is very rich. It allows you to update information, update your model, prior, whatever you call it, as the information is flowing in, and that is why it is extremely powerful tool used in various applications. So those of you who use it in biology, and you may not care at all about the philosophical debate about frequentist versus Bayesian. It's something which seems to give reasonable answers, so we will use it. So let me just stop here.
Questions?
I would like to ask you one thing. I understood your reasoning why you said this. My question is there any question but asking, do I die? That is an ill-posed question. That is not an ill-posed question. If you think it makes sense.
No. If you ask the question, is B going to die? That's not ill-posed, because the answer can only be yes or no.
But then B and A are the more or less the same thing. So
No. A is asking the question.
yeah.
A is asking the question.
If you are specifying one definite person, it may be A or it may be B, it will mean the same thing ultimately.
No.
Unless you are specifically asking it.
So who is asking the question and about whom? That is different. No. The warden cannot answer. If you are A and you ask, am I going to die? The warden is not going to answer. He doesn't want to risk being hanged himself next day.
If the warden is smart enough, he is not even going to answer whether B is going to die or not.
Yeah, good question. But so what is your question again?
No, my question was that without specifically assigning one index, that is he going to die or not, is there any other way of asking a question which will not be enforced.
Tell me about both B and C, who is going to die?
Okay, at this point, this Monty Hall problem a few years ago, some lady in the US, I think, discussed it on the TV show and gave the right answer and got thousands of angry emails from scientists, physicists, everybody saying that she gave the wrong answer. This can go on forever, so let's stop it here. Any questions not about the Monty Hall problem? Yeah.
Yeah, so this is a question regarding priors again and subjective versus subjective. So I'm going to pose a question to you and you give your answer.
Okay.
So suppose it's going back to your traffic problem for
Okay.
the parameter theta.
Yeah.
You knew nothing about it. You don't know anything about the parameter theta.
Okay.
Would you agree that you should put a non-informative prior?
No, because there is a physical limit to how many vehicles can come there. If I give 5-minute interval, if I argue that it is maximum 10,000,
I'm
let's say.
asking a question of principle. So supposing there was a parameter theta for which you did not really know anything about it. So you did not even know what the physical limits, etc. Would you still say that it's not correct to give a non-informative prior?
Oh, I won't say that then. If I really don't know anything, but if you come to the traffic problem, I will argue that there is a physical limit there.
Yeah.
And you see, that is where it comes down to. If in any real application, you will have some idea about it, some physical limits. It is never going to be 0 to infinity, all values permissible.
Yeah,
So
but then you would say I just put a flat prior on the bounds?
then I may not use Bayesian paradigm. Because flat bounds again bothers me.
Yes.
Okay, so I may not use Bayesian paradigm, I might use something else.
But Basu, D. Basu would say, if you know nothing about the parameter, you have no business working on the problem. That's D. Basu's answer. The other answer is the fact that you have specified a probability model. You have specified a model. You have some idea of the parameter. So you can't completely. Now, when you say flat prior, if it's a uniform prior, that's all right, which is what Rajiv is saying, that you have some idea what the limits are. But when you put a flat prior, they put a flat prior on the real lines. So you've broken the first law of probability. And the good Bayesian is the Bayesian who is completely subservient to probability and the rules of probability. So he would be, or she would be breaking that kind. So I would not put those kind of problems. Rajiv says he would work on the problem, which is fine.
I mean, if at all I have to, then I will go to some other paradigm, but not a Bayesian paradigm. Flat prior still bothers me.
Flat prior on an infinite interval.
Infinite interval. Yeah, flat prior, by that we mean on the infinite interval. If it's flat prior on 0 to 10,000 doesn't bother me at all. It's non-informative prior.
But in there, he said something that I think was very sensible about this problem, that of course you define it on a finite interval, and then often you can show that your posterior can take the limit of this interval according to the infinity, and this limit is well defined and independent of precisely how big you pick it. If it's much bigger than the range suggested by the data. I think that's a very fair answer for what sense a flat prior may still have. Of course, a flat prior has no sense in the fact that it's not normalizable, but a limit posterior under a flat prior may still be well defined.
So if the limit to infinity is always taken at the end of your calculation and not earlier.
Right.
Then it automatically-
Then I think
That's it, if you use the data function.
Yeah.
You can always use the data function exactly in that sense.
Yeah, but that's okay.
Okay, I think since we are running a bit behind, let's go on to the last talk. Thank Rajiv. The last talk was Satya Prakash Singh of IIT Bombay.